Hello class, this is Demetrius Wilson with Business One. We are on Chapter 2, Understanding Economics and How It Affects Business. It is a very important topic that we need to always review, whether it be domestically or with how it affects other countries. Our learning objectives or our learning goals are right here. So number one is explain basic economics. Number two, explain what capitalism and how free markets work. Compare socialism and communism. And four, analyze trends toward mixed economies. Number five, describe the economic system of the United States, including the significance of key economic indicators, especially the GDP or gross domestic product, productivity and the business cycle. And six, contrast fiscal and monetary policy and explain how each affects the economy. So it's always good to check those out ahead of time because you go in knowing what you're kind of looking for in terms of reading the chapter. So as always, the chapter starts off with a great story. I want you guys to check out whatever story, whatever, depending upon what version you have of Business One. But there's always a story at the beginning. Check out the story; very relative, and they're typically very interesting. You don't make the front page story if you're not interesting. So at the top here it says name that company. It says this organization lends small amounts of money to people in poor countries. For example, it loaned a woman in Uganda enough to buy a refrigerator. She was able to sell fresh food from the refrigerator. Remember I told you guys about these microfinancing projects that people do in order to give people money that don't have enough to get a loan from a business. They don't have enough collateral or anything like that, but they've got a great idea, so you support them through micro lending. So, economics, that's what we're going to be talking about. So, economics, that is the study of how society chooses to employ resources to produce goods and services and distribute them for consumption among various competing groups and individuals, right? So, we're going to make a decision on how we're going to use the resources, right? So, if you have some water, you can use water to wash a car, you can use water to drink, you can use it to wash vegetables, you can use it to do all kinds of different things, but you have to decide how you're going to use those resources. Typically, you can't use them for both things, right? You can't drink the water and then use it to wash the car, right? And I think you definitely do not want to wash the car and then take the water and then drink it. So two different types of economics. You have microeconomics and then the bigger picture macroeconomics. So microeconomics is a part of economic study that looks at the behavior of people and organizations in a particular market, so in specific markets. But macroeconomics is overarching. This is a part of economic study that looks at the operation of a nation's economy as a whole, right? So that's the whole shebang, right? So microeconomics is everything. Microeconomics is just in a specific market. But I will tell you, microeconomics is typically I won't say the more popular, but it gets more attention a lot of times because you need to focus on these specific markets. So I want you guys to pay attention to these two pictures. Does it look like the same place? Does it look like countries that are close to each other? But let's read the caption. It says the economic contrast is remarkable. Business is booming in Seoul, South Korea, pictured on the left, but North Korea, pictured right here on the right, a communist country, is not doing well. There's a picture on the right of thousands of workers using old-fashioned tools in a work for food program shows. So just think about that. They're using all these old-fashioned tools like where's where's the thing that the little machine you jump in and can dig up the holes and everything. Instead, you have all these people with tools. Very, ineffective, but that's a very drastic contrast between the two. But you say, well, could it be because of their type of government, they're communists, and this? Well, let's find out. Let's talk about what a socialist is. Let's talk about what a communist country looks like, and let's talk about capitalism, which is what we are here in America. Resource development. This is the study of how to increase resources and to create conditions that will better use those resources. So let's think about this. So you want to create resources, but sometimes it's that you're diverting the resources to be used in a different manner. So for instance, uh, resources such as the sun. We live in California, or at least most of us do live in California, and we have a resource which is the sun. That's why you see so much solar electricity, so many people with solar panels on top of their house, right? So you have to think about that. So if you live in Oregon, what type of resource do you have, or natural resource? You have rain, right? So that's why they have cisterns that it gets rained into, and it converts that rainwater to water that you can cook with, clean with, bathe with, and things of that nature, right? So again, resource development, the study of how to increase resources and to create the conditions, right? So you want to increase the resources. How do you duplicate them, or if you can duplicate them, and then you want to create conditions that will make better uses of those resources. So getting solar panels will be creating a better use of the sun as a resource, and a free resource at that. So thinking green, so bringing in the green with the green products. I want you to read that. So it's really good that each chapter they talk about the environment and how things should be going green. And I really like the books that key in on that. Check this picture out right there. You may get hungry. It looks like dinner if you like fish. But it says new ways of producing goods and services add resources to the economy and create more employment. Fish farms, for instance, create both food and jobs. Think about it for a second before I read the rest, right? It creates food, so people get the food, and it creates job because someone has to work the fish farm, right? Can you think of other innovations that can help increase economic development? Well, I was just talking about solar panels. Solar panels weren't that big. Before you would only see the solar panels in popular science, but now you see them everywhere. They're on everybody's roof and everything. You see all these different companies open up selling solar panels. Some of you guys may have even worked in that industry. Well, we're using resources appropriately, and then what else are we doing? We're also creating jobs, and even better, creating jobs dealing with natural resources. So a term that Adam Smith, and you can look him up, Google him, check it out on YouTube. I'm sure there are plenty of videos about Adam Smith, one that I've used for other classes. He's most famous for his term coined the invisible hand. So it's a phrase coined by Adam Smith to describe the process that turns self-directed gain into social and economic benefits for all. Well, you say, well, how is this entrepreneur benefiting going to benefit everybody else? Well, it does make sense when you sit down, kind of write it out, and think about it. So if you look in the caption here, it says, according to Adam Smith's theory, business owners are motivated to work hard because they know what they will earn and keep the rewards of their labor. When they prosper as the owner of the store, they are able to add employees, right? So that helps the economy and grow, right? So we may have another opportunity to franchise out for someone else, indirectly helping the community and the larger economy grow in the process. What might motivate you to start your own business? So you just have to think about that. Businesses have been started, and they don't just benefit the person who started the business; it benefits other people. So now people have jobs and they have insurance, and all kind of different things that come along with having that actual job. I also like the fact that the book always has these different sections on ethical decisions, because that's where we've struggled, especially in the United States. We've kind of struggled with making non or unethical decisions in the business environment. And just think about it. You really didn't hear anything about that until recently, right? People committed all these white collar crimes and nobody heard anything about it. Just wasn't being addressed. But until people realize that, hey, there are repercussions, and you're messing with people's money and their livelihood, these things need to be dealt with. So on progress, I want you to do these. I want you to do those on your own. Progress assessment, ask yourself those questions. Ask them to your fellow classmates, friends, family, whoever, but get a good picture, because it's not just what's in the textbook. It's also, kind of taking what's in the textbook and applying it to the real world, right? Because you can have as many textbooks as you want, but if you can't apply that to your job function, then how useful is it really? Capitalism, and that's what we have here in America. So it's an economic system in which all or most of the factors of production and distribution are privately owned and operated for profit, right? So that just means, for the most part, these companies that are selling whatever goods to you are privately owned and they are operating for profit, right? They want to make a certain amount of money. And just remember, like I said before, just because a company is not operating for profit does not mean that they are not profitable, right? It's just not their goal. They can still be profitable just like Red Cross. So these are foundations of capitalism. I'll let you read the rest on your own, but number one is the right to own private property. You're responsible for reading the rest. Um, So right, you can purchase a house, you can purchase a building, the right to own a business and keep all that the business profits. Right, so you can create a business, you can keep those profits. You don't have to share and split that with the government outside of taxes. The right to freedom of competition. Right, you can compete, but there are also certain laws that deter people from competing in the wrong way. And number four, the right to freedom of choice, right? You should be able to choose certain things throughout your life as opposed to being told what you have to choose. And there's certain systems, and we'll talk about those in a second, where if you buy a house, you can't move out of the house for a certain period of time. Here, like, hey, if I have the money and I want to buy a house and go somewhere else, then I can. But in this country, they deter that from happening. Spotlight on small business. Small loan can make a big difference. I want you guys to read that, become familiar with those. Good stories. And it's good to break it up so it's not just, oh, we're just looking at definitions, looking at terms, looking at theories. See, stories are good. It's good to tell stories and go through things that apply to business and the things that you're studying. So we'll go on and talk a little bit about free markets. All right, so supply and demand. Anytime you talk about economics, you're going to see supply and demand. And if you've already taken economics, you saw so many supply and demand curves that you never want to see one again. And you probably don't even want to hear me talk about supply and demand. But it is very important. So the quantity supply is the quantity of products that manufacturers or owners are willing, right, keyword, to sell at different prices at a specific time. And then demand is the quantity of products that people are willing to buy at different prices at a specific time, right? So I'm demanding, I need to buy this car, and the supply is these people need to buy this car, let's supply them with it. But you don't want to get you don't want to have a surplus and not be able to get rid of those cars, right? So if I have 6,000 cars and only 4,000 people buy those cars, and I have 2,000 cars that are just going to sit there, right? So you want to be sure that you don't have a surplus, but you also want to make sure that you don't have a shortage, meaning that you don't have too few, right? So market price is the price demanded or determined by supply and demand, and that's when you take your supply curve and your demand curve, you look where it meets in the middle, where it intersects, and that's your equilibrium point. Uh, so that's the market price. This is the price determined by supply and demand. And there's your curve right there. Here's the supply curve, and you can see, if you check that out, that's the price, quantity of t-shirts. Then this is the price on this side, quantity of t-shirts. Those two intersect, and you'll see that they meet at around, I think, 25 or something like that. But it's much easier if you go down here and see this. All right, and I was right at 25. So the place where quantity demanded and quantity supplied meet is called the equilibrium point. We put both the supply and demand curves on the same graph. We find that they intersect at a price where the quantity supplied and the quantity demanded are equal. In the long run, the market price will tend or trend toward the equilibrium point, right? So meaning the price right here, it will trend toward down this curve right there. Okay, so hopefully that all makes sense to you guys. Sometimes you have to go over economics, a few times in order to get that part right. So let's talk about competition. So we have different types of competition, and if you look up here, you see the economic concept of demand measures the quantities of goods and services that people are willing to buy. So judging from this photo, people are waiting to buy the iPad, right? So you have all this hype and everything where there's a demand to purchase these iPads, iPhones, and things of that nature. People want to buy them, and that's why they are sitting there, in line, waiting at all kind of crazy hours. All right, so perfect competition. So pay careful attention to these three. This is the degree of competition in which there are so many sellers in the market that none is large enough to dictate the price of a product, right? If you dictate the price of the product, the only thing you can probably really dictate is that you drop the price, and then you will not be able to cover your expenses and you will be out of business. But perfect competition, everybody's in it, and we're trying to see who's the best. And maybe somebody has to run and retreat. Maybe they come back and bigger, stronger, kind of like Jack in the Box and Hyundai. But it just depends on the market and how they treat their business and how they come back. Monopolistic competition. This is the degree of competition in which a large number of sellers produce very similar products that buyers nevertheless perceive as different, right? So if I want a hot dog and I go to the store, there are different companies that make hot dogs. It's not just a bag that just says hot dogs, right? So what differentiates these brands that I'm looking at? Oligopoly. This is the degree of competition in which there are just a few sellers and they dominate the market. So not a whole bunch of sellers, but not just one either. All right. And then a monopoly, and no, not the game. This is the degree of competition in which only one seller controls the total supply of a product or service and sets the price, right? So it's illegal, but they let certain things like utilities, they let that slide in terms of those. So, but yes, for like just a company, like say if I want to go open up a gym, then that's not gonna work there. All right, progress assessment. Make sure you ask yourself these questions. If you know all the answers to these, then either you read the book really thoroughly or you listened to the lecture very thoroughly or both. And I'm sure some of you have. Socialism. This is an economic system based on the premise that if if not most, basic businesses should be owned by the government so that profits can be more evenly distributed among people, right? So we want to spread the peanut butter across the bread a little bit more even in socialism. And some people say that, hey, what we're doing now with the ACA or Obamacare, Affordable Care Act, is that we're becoming more like of like socialists. But you have to see that there's a good mix of the features from each type of government that if combined you can have a really big powerhouse in terms of a company, right? So socialism has been more successful in some countries than others. This photo shows Denmark's clean and modern transportation system, which is a great thing. It's like, check that out, we're good to go. But in Greece, overspending caused a debt crisis that forced the government to impose austerity measures, and that many Greeks oppose, right? So it works for different strokes for different folks. It works in one country, doesn't work in another country. Doesn't mean it's good or bad. It just means that it didn't work for them. And because of a lot of socialist countries, you'll see that they experience what they call the brain drain. So I'm going to tell you what the definition is, and I'm going to give you a prime example. Brain drain is the loss of the best and brightest people to other countries, right? So why would the best and brightest people go to other countries? Well, let's just say, right, India is a socialist country, right? And a doctor is there, but the doctor, he feels like, hey, I'm a great doctor, but I'm not getting paid what I should get paid. Because I'm getting taxed, so heavily. I'm basically getting paid the same amount that the person in maintenance service is getting paid. So what does that doctor do? That doctor picks up his stuff and leaves and comes to the United States, comes to California, opens up a practice. Now he's feeling valued because he's making his full worth working at the company. So a lot of times you see that, but a lot of people think that you think, oh, I see this nationality. There's so many doctors. They have so many doctors here. Well, it's not that they have so many doctors here. It's that the people who are doctors over there come back and they say, you know what, I'm going to go over here because I'm going to get my full value as a worker, as an individual. Communism is an economic and political system in which the government makes almost all economic decisions and owns almost all the major factors of production, right? So in communism, hey, we're in charge, be quiet, we know what we're doing, just sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride. It's interesting, I had a student from a different campus, and that student was going back to China. She said, hey, when you email me, please email me on my other email address, don't email me on my Gmail. And so if any guys know that like in China you can't go into Google, right? So it's a no-no. But it's because they have their own version of something like a Google, so they don't even allow people to go into Google, use Gmail and things of that nature. So hopefully something that change in the future. All right. So there's been a trend towards mixed economies, right? So mixed meaning, so the government doesn't control it all and the private sector doesn't control it all, right? But typically it's going to be either, like maybe the government controls most or the private sector controls most when it's mixed. It's never like a 50-50. I mean, it's possible it could be, but typically not. Right? So, free market economies exist when the market largely determines what goods and services get produced, who gets them, and how the economy grows. Capitalism is a popular term for this economic system. And command economies exist when the government largely decides what goods and services will be produced, who gets them, and how the economy will grow. Socialism and communism are variations of this economic system, right? So you see what different buckets those fall into. All right, let's go on to the next page. All right, so reaching beyond our borders. Also good to get a cultural perspective of what's going on in the world, not just what's going on in the United States, right? Just something as simple as, you go to France and you take your French fries, you say, want something on my fries, they give you some mayonnaise. You put your fries in mayonnaise. Here we put them in ketchup. A lot of different cultural, differences throughout the world. But be sure to read Reaching Beyond Our Borders. Always very interesting, especially if you're an individual that plans on or is already in international business. So, just as we were already talking about these mixed economies, economic systems in which allocation of resources is made by the market and some by the government, right? So, just a combination of the two. So be sure to go over your progress assessment questions right here. What led to the emergence of socialism, things like that. So I tell you, it will expand your horizons. It will help you think more appropriately in terms of what you should be learning in terms of chapter 2. Alright, computer running a little slow. I want you to look at this on your own, but it's a very good grid, and it shows capitalism, socialism, communism, and mixed economy. And it gives you an example of a country. So you have the United States for capitalism, Sweden for socialism, communism is North Korea, and mixed economy is Germany, right? So, like I said, different strokes for different folks. You have to look at and see what applies best to your company and your country and yourself as a person who, like a doctor who has his own business and own practice. Where should I go to make the most money, right? And so I want you to look over this chart on your own and just make sure you're familiar with those. Pretty long chart, but it makes a lot of sense. Gross domestic product. This is the total value of final goods and services produced in a country in a given year, right? So in year 2015, what was our total gross domestic product, right? And so they have people that figure out those numbers and everything. So those are goods and services. All right. So unemployment rate. So unemployment rate, obviously not a good thing. Anything with unemployment at the beginning of it is not a good thing. But it's the number of civilians at least 16 years old who are unemployed and tried to find a job within the prior 4 weeks, right? So if you've just been, sleeping in your parents' basement for 5 weeks, then you're not going to be included in that population. Inflation, right? And inflation is everywhere. Trust me, deflation is nowhere. A general rise in prices of goods and services over time, right? So, how many guys remember when gas was just $1, right? I'm sure some of you guys remember when gas was a lot cheaper, but I remember it was $1 because I said I have $20, I can get 20 gallons, right? But now it's a lot more. Inflation, things go up. Just think about it. Has any of your health insurance ever went down in price? It just continues to go up and up and up and up and up, right? So I want to talk about the different types of unemployment, right? Because there are different types of unemployment, so you have to be aware of what they are and kind of what they're labeled as and what they're called. So you have frictional unemployment, refers to those people who have quit work because they didn't like the job, boss, or the working conditions, and who haven't found a new job, right? So that's frictional. There was friction. I left the job. That's how it works. Structural unemployment refers to unemployment caused by the restructuring of firms or by a mismatch between the skills of your job seekers, right? So the company says, hey, there are going to be some layoffs, then that's a structural unemployment. Or if I say, hey, I'm going to call you in a room and write you up, and this is going to be it because these are the reasons why. Cyclical unemployment occurs because of a recession or a similar downturn in the business cycle, right? So they have these cycles, they go up, they go down, but that's called cyclical unemployment. Seasonal unemployment occurs when demand for labor varies over the year, as with harvesting crops or working at Macy's. Same type of thing, right? So you have to know and understand, like, what's a contingent worker? What's a worker that is not laid off or fired or anything, but they only work at a certain time during the year. All right, let's go on to the next page. Disinflation, deflation, stagflation, right? I want you to know those. So disinflation is a situation in which price increases are slowing the inflation, are slowing. The inflation rate is declining, right? So inflation rate is slowing down, it's declining. Deflation is a situation when prices are declining. Don't hold your breath or wait for that one. Stagflation, a situation when the economy is slowing, but prices are going up anyhow, right? So that's not good for us if we're getting paid less, not getting a raise, and then prices are going up. That's not going to help. Uh, and I'll let you guys review consumer price index and product price index on your own as we try and get through the rest of this. Let's go through the business cycles, right? Economic boom is just what it sounds like. Business is booming. That's number one. A recession is 2 or more consecutive quarters of decline in GDP, right? So that's number two. And obviously, number two is not good. Neither is number three. A depression is a severe recession, usually accompanied by deflation. Business cycles rarely go through the depression phase, but as a country, we went through the Great Depression and really had a significant impact on businesses. And then recovery occurs when the economy stabilizes and starts to grow, right? So companies starting to grow now, things are great. Hopefully you didn't, abandon ship and leave the company. This eventually leads to economic boom, starting the cycle all over again, right? So it's just good to know that they're written somewhere, that they're in the textbook, and you know and understand how that business cycle, how it moves. All right, so fiscal policy, you check that one out on your own. National debt, the sum of government deficits over time, right? So how much money do we owe as a country? You check those two out. And so here, using monetary policy to keep to keep the economy going, right? So what they mean is set a policy that says we're going to do this so we can keep the economy going. The economic crisis beginning in 2008 caused much anguish among Wall Street workers and people in general. How effective was the government's response, right? So some of you say, hey, not effective enough because I'm not living in a big fancy house, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it wasn't the appropriate decision that was made. Uh, but but as you see, it didn't just affect people on Wall Street either. It affected people in the real estate industry and some industries that just have not come back to full force as of yet. But for those of you a little older and remember the 80s, this did happen in the 80s as well. So I want you to go over your progress assessment questions there, and then I want you to go through your summary, right? So remember, at the end of the chapter, don't get like, hey, I've read enough, I've seen enough. No, go to the summary. They have some really good information in there. Go to the key terms, and check those out. Make sure that you're not missing anything, and you're good to go on there. And if you have time, you can go to critical thinking and developing work skills. Uh, but typically, students don't have time to go that far. So since this is week two, I want you guys to make sure that you've taken your quizzes for chapter one, for chapter two. Make sure that you remain on task. You don't want to get the nasty gram from me saying, hey, I'm planning on dropping you from the class, or just a notification that you were dropped. So it's Business One is a great resource. It's a great book as sort of the foundation for all of the other books that you're going to have in management, in business, and things of that nature. So, as always, this has been chapter 2. Have a good day and a great week.